Did you know that Hazbin Hotel and Helluva Boss are both set in the same universe, which I like to call the Helluverse Cinematic Universe, or the HCU for short. Totally not a reference to another cinematic universe that's very popular. However, today I wanted to talk about something that's been on my mind for years. That being how I feel as though these two shows being in the same universe is ultimately really pointless and doesn't actually really mean much. Right now at least. Usually within cinematic universes like this, there's methods of connecting the two shows so the universe feels interconnected. However, Helluva Boss and Hazbin Hotel do not feel like they take place in the same universe whatsoever. I mean, somewhat, but not enough to actually matter. The only way we know they actually do is because VivziePop said so, and they both supposedly take place in the same fictional hell. But that ultimately doesn't mean anything and has zero, and I mean zero, impact on either of the two shows' stories. In this video, I'm going to go over why these two shows being set in the same universe feels pointless and how they wasted the interconnected universe concept. There's lack of significant connections. When creating two shows or multiple movies set within the same universe, it's important to make each show work on their own, not relying on each other to make the show's story work, as narratively speaking, they are two different shows. However, it is crucial to make these two shows feel connected in some way, not so much to remind the viewer they're connected, but more so to world build the cinematic universe, and also remind them obviously, more than you could ever do with just one show. Helluva Boss completely fails to do this. The only connections to Hazbin Hotel the show actually has are very far and few in between, and don't really add much in terms of building the universe. For example, the characters in Helluva Boss are never seen in Hazbin Hotel and vice versa. The only time they ever kind of cross over was maybe the occasional cameo or background Easter egg that only the most eagle-eyed fan would actually notice, making it non-existent to the average viewer. I'm going to use the most popular interconnected universe of movies, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or the MCU for short, as an example. So after Tony Stark introduced himself as Iron Man, the next movie, The Incredible Hulk, didn't feel connected at all, unless you knew that beforehand. However, what these two movies do are something called post-credit scenes, that world building connect these other characters from their other standalone films. In the post-credit scene of Incredible Hulk, we see Tony Stark finding General Ross that we saw throughout the movie, telling him about recruiting Banner for the Avengers Initiative, which was set up in the previous post-credit scene of the previous movie, Iron Man. This was setting up the cinematic universe and was immediately followed up on, making these movies feel like they really took place in the same world, while still retaining their core identity and their standalone projects. This is something the modern MCU actually struggles with as of now, but that's a whole other video since I could talk forever about that alone. This is a concept that Helluva Boss or Hazbin could easily use to connect these two shows better, but unfortunately they really don't do much organically to connect the two shows together. There's no name drops to the other shows, characters, or events, or anything like that. Another big issue of these shows being set in the same universe is that there is no confirmation as to when Helluva Boss takes place in relation to Hazbin Hotel. Do they take place before the other? Is Helluva Boss set after Hazbin Hotel? Or are these two shows' events taking place at the same time and each show's events are intertwining with one another? After almost 4 years, we still don't have an answer to this question, not from the stories the shows tell, and not even from Viv herself. It's almost as if she's never been asked this question. Before. To be honest, I don't think she's even thought of this herself. So if the creator doesn't even care about an interconnected universe, or maybe doesn't even know when it takes place, why should we care? It being quote-unquote connected means really nothing in the grand scheme of things. Making everything that goes on be stuck in a vacuum and have absolutely no impact on the other show or the universe as a whole. For example, the Battle of Hell, which took place at the climax of Hazbin Hotel Season 1, which had the whole attention of Hell, as we saw in Season 2, which recently premiered, that this was a significant event in the story and has a lot of publicity on the hotel now. However, this event is never brought up on, mentioned, or touched upon in all of Helluva Boss, making it feel like whatever happens in Hazbin Hotel never happened on the other side and vice versa, which makes these shows feel like they are set in completely different universes. You may be thinking, well Axel, maybe the events of Hazbin Hotel take place after Helluva Boss. Well, there's nothing to indicate that since Hazbin doesn't even reference anything that occurred in Helluva Boss. There's absolutely no telling as to when these two events of either show take place, which leads them to again feel like they're take place in two separate universes. Sure, we get that one Easter egg in House of Asmodeus when Blitzo was reading the newspaper documenting the extermination, right? However, in Hazbin, it was established that the extermination happens dozens of times before, so we have no idea which extermination event this is actually referring to. So no, I don't really count a loose connection like this, since it really tells us nothing. The Seven Deadly Sins crossover between both shows, however, we don't actually see them interact with one another, and again, they sort of exist in a vacuum. The Seven Deadly Sins shown in either show don't ever mention the other, so while we know that they are in the same universe, obviously, the only way they're ever shown is via Easter eggs, like in Season 2 Episode 1, where we can see Lucifer's wall showing the sins, but that's the only real on-screen connection we actually have gotten so far. If the only way you can tell your audience that your two shows are connected is via, I don't know, small Easter eggs you have to dig for and that ultimately don't even impact either show's story at all, you failed at making an interconnected universe, period. Now I want to make it clear, I'm not demanding Viv to make a Helluva Boss Hazbin Hotel crossover episode every other week to make the universe feel connected, as that's a little unnecessary. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying that there should be more done to show that these shows' events take place in the same universe by making the events affect the other show, or at least, tie into it in some way so it can build the plot and the world building. Instead of just existing in the show it occurred in, making it ultimately not matter when watching the other show, making the shows feel ever so distant from one another. When making two shows that share the same universe, you need to make them feel connected and make the events of both shows have an impact or consequences to the other show in the world as a whole. Otherwise, them taking place in the same universe feels completely meaningless, and feels like they only share a universe because Viv felt like it and just wanted an interconnected universe. Well, I don't blame her, as the interconnected universe as a concept is interesting and has a ton of potential. Hell, see, look what Marvel was able to do. But before the multiverse saga, now it just kind of sucks. However, nothing is done with that potential. The concept dies with it and leaves you wanting more from the universe. It's so neglected that I had friends who watched both shows have no knowledge that the show's sharing the same universe until I told them about it. And I only knew that because Viv said during an interview years ago that they took place in the same fictional hell. But then, a standard viewer who doesn't know this prior knowledge wouldn't know otherwise unless they really, really dug for the little details. But other than that, they wouldn't know. Before we got the Helluvaverse update video earlier this year, where Blitzo and Charlie finally met, a lot of people who aren't hardcore fans either forgot or didn't know at all that they were connected. The crossover is going to feel pretty lukewarm, I think, since there hasn't been any real build-up connecting the two shows together and slowly over time showing that they're connected. And how much you want to bet that the crossover is going to feel not organic at all whatsoever and just have the narrative force these characters to meet rather than them naturally meeting in a, where it would make sense to where it's believable. I mean, heck, the Helluvaverse update video, Blitzo just says fuck it and opens a portal and makes them all meet. I know that was just for an update video and it isn't really canon, it was kind of played up for laughs, but knowing Viv's writing, I wouldn't be shocked if she did something similar to this inevitable crossover. However, the interconnected universe concept Viv uses for her two most popular shows fails at what it set out to do and be interconnected, by neglecting to reference the show's events and make them not really have much of an impact or real consequences on the story of either show. But let me know down in the comments if you think Viv should do more to connect these two shows. Hit that subscribe button for more Helluvaverse and all things animation. Join the Discord server down below. This is Axel signing off. Good night.